Gone with the Whales, Chapter 3. You remember our situation. They're escaping in their canoe. Chapter 3. Who are we? Cruising was easy with Lolo aboard, if crowded. Lolo means crazy. As the rain hid the clipper and longboat, he abruptly veered to port and put space between us and the Polly. That's the cliffs. Our much-chested sail rag and my homemade jib fluttered and buzzed at being forced up into the wind, but they held. He kept slacking off the tiller at the right moment. The sailors could not expect nor copy this course and tactic. Safely miles offshore and keel down, we eased northward. Winds and storm had eased here and seemed about to blow out. Good. If the trades returned, we could sail on one tack, northwest to Kauai. And they did. This is a note from Robbie Gordon. I am a lousy sailor. I dumped my daughter Raven and myself once on a sailfish in Lake Muskoka. Back to our story. But where are we going? Where were we going and why? We were thankful that the telegraph had not yet reached the islands, nor the railroad. But the sugar planters had plans for a railroad. Yet, word might have spread. We were not the only sly outrigger around. Might have spread 150 miles to Honolulu on Oahu, and then on to Kauai and forlorn bare Niihau. Our chances lay farther to the northwest. The Hawaiian or Sandwich Islands peter out there in a chain of tiny rocks and small atolls, all uninhabited by people. But ships could take on food, albatross and other eggs, and many birds too. Live green turtles to put on deck, upside down. We vowed never to do this. And a few coconuts. We would need the latter. Other drinking water was not to be found on these barren islets. The coconut water is amazingly fresh. Rain cats, of course, was, quote, old hat to us. Literally, my gray CSA cavalry hat served to catch rain. After provisioning, we might sneak farther northwest, 1,000 miles or so, to Guam, an inhabited place where gold might buy a sloop, and then, maybe, and then, question mark. That night and the following 2 days were tranquil and magical. The steady night breeze, high, slow rollers, and glowing seas in our wake lulled us. Catherine and I nestled aft, me lying supine in the narrow hull, she with her snowy head, dai washi outi, her snowy head on my chest, tiller over us both, so close that when it swung it brushed her breasts and cloud of hair. How could she have such hair and be so young? She murmured it was a mark of her family. Even her poor brother had it at 23, but not at 19. I thought with a start, how old am I? How old is she? What month is this? What year? She, of course, knew, but she teased me. It's 1776, she brightly said. No, it's not, I said. It's 1902, and we have grandchildren. And so on. In the starlight, helped briefly by a tiny crescent of moon, I tried the ukulele. A figure perched silhouetted on the needle bow. It was Manalolo on the balls of his feet. As each wave shifted and tilted, his ball bearings kept him steady magically. Later, he told us, that way he could feel the waves coming from different directions. It was ecstasy for him. He became the sea. They were his chief sailing instructions, along with tasting the water and endless watching of the skies, clouds as well as stars. Back at Nailani's, they had discussed our plans at length with us, bringing forth Nailani's chief treasure, guarded for centuries perhaps, a Polynesian sea chart. of all the Hawaiian chain, including the Northwest Reefs and Isles. She said proudly her people were Ali'i nobility. It was made, the chart was made of slender splints of bamboo, slotted in a large rectangular koa wood frame. Parallel straight splints showed a prevailing swell. More parallel splints were stronger swells. Curved splints indicated the way waves were bent around tiny islands. The islands themselves were tiny bright shells, carefully tied where two or more sticks would intersect, etc. I had never felt so stupid in my life. These people had knowledge which Princeton University never heard of, which could have saved countless mariners' lives, and many other things. And we dared to call them savages. French frigate Shoals, especially, was a ship's graveyard. On the magic chart, they had showed me how to avoid it by another name, of course. Catherine knew the chart names, bless her. How to avoid it by reading the swells, plus finding a certain plant of a peculiar smell which grew there only and often washed into the waves. They had a dried sample to show and sniff, very little of it. How old, I wondered. And a certain cloud bank was found there, and on and on. Their memories were both amazing, as they quickly and laughingly corrected each other in that rapid, singing Hawaiian tongue. Of course, now the chart was far away, but he knew it, oh yes. Even though he'd never been farther than Nihoa, only 50 miles from Niihau, he looked and acted like he could sail us anywhere, even without a stick and shell magic box. We bypassed Nihoa and others, and after 3 cramped days, Lolo would sleep on the outrigger, we neared a big cloud bank over a fairly big but very low islet, maybe a couple miles across. She said it might be Laysan. She wasn't sure. Lolo said it was known for 2 kinds of flightless birds. He had eaten them as unsalted jerky, a duck and a rail, easy to catch and tasty. And I thought, doomed. I was right. He said he could smell these birds from miles away after eating them once, years before. Gusty winds made us toss as we tried to approach stealthily, but our fears were triggered before we reached the shelter of seaside groves of twisted shrubs. We had company. It had been hidden by the island as we approached. A large black ship. Were they all black, I thought, depressed. A large black ship, bark-rigged, came around the isle, all eyes toward us. Was she a whaler? Not quite. Too big. And no smell. Whalers made you puke. No name at the bow, and no flag. A pirate, perhaps. Meanwhile, a large cutter, sailing lifeboat, loaded with men, came around the isle like another crab's claw to pinch us. On shore, we saw 6 or 10 men with guns, baskets of eggs, and many dead albatrosses hung about them, defying the curse of Coleridge's Ancient Mariner. It turned out damned men have little to lose. As the ship slowly turned to point down our throats, men aboard her, mostly blonde and mustachioed, pulled aside a board at the bow to reveal the shocking gold letters. Louisiana, Confederate States Navy, Mobile. Parenthesis from Robert Gordon. This ship and her amazing career is a historical reality, although, of course, I added a tad. American Heritage is a great magazine. End parenthesis. Up the main mast ran a red rag with gold trim, the battle flag of the Confederacy. Below it, meekly followed an unfamiliar sight, the rarely seen Confederate naval ensign. At the same time, 16 concealed gun ports were opened, 8 on each side. She hove to, within a cable's length. None of my ruses this time, and from her bows we were accosted by the very likeness of the departed pirate Blackbeard. No burning matches in his hair, but said hair was black and long and tangled, under a hat just like mine.
Can we pause for a minute?